and gentlemen, please welcome the stars of Sky News Australia's fantastic Outsiders program, Rowan Dean, Rita Panahi and James Morrow.
Thank you for that great welcome. Now, I'd just like to ask, is there anybody here who is not familiar with our little TV show called The Outsiders? Could you put your hand up, please?
And get the hell out. God damn it.
Okay, I can't see any hands up. Okay, I'm going to ask another question. Are there any Bob Dylan fans here?
Oh, God.
Okay, if you're a Bob Dylan fan, can you please stand up? Please stand up. I'm a Bob Dylan fan. Please stand up with me.
There's
Bob
like
Dylan
three
fans.
people. Oh,
Okay, let's have the lights on. Okay, now then.
Well, we're gonna
What I want you to do, people who are standing up, that's fantastic. Stay standing up. Do not sit down. The rest of you, what I would like you to do now is practice what I call a cat's bum mouth. That's when you purse your lips like this and look like you're very disapproving. Think of Paul Barry on the ABC Media Watch talking about Outsiders, for example. So, face like that, okay, very disapproving. If you can't pull a face like that, could you please just practice hissing for me? Hiss. Can I hear a hiss? That's good. That's good. Hiss. Okay. Now, on the count of 3, I want you all to pull a cat's bum mouth and hiss and point at the people standing up. Yes. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Louder. Come on. Come on. You don't like these people. You don't like them. They're Bob Dylan fans. You hate them. Okay. Now, you can sit down now, folks. Now, did you see how easy it was for me to divide a group of people? We've got 1,000 people here. This is what a so-called conservative government did in this state less than 12 months ago. They turned 90% of the population against 10% of the population. They made your neighbors pull cat's bums' mouths and hiss at you and point at you as you walk down the street, simply because you hadn't taken some medicine or whatever it was. They can do it then, they'll do it again, and they'll keep on doing it. They want to do it, as we had the brilliant Jacinta Price this morning, the bravest woman in Australia, by the way. Give a big round of applause. Jacinta Price is the bravest woman in Australia. And shortly, I'll be introducing you to the second bravest woman in Australia. Rita's the third. We are in a war against authoritarianism. We are in a war against the collective. We are now in a situation, whatever CPAC was 3 or 4 years ago, climate change, immigration, whatever it was, we are now in a very, very simple fight. It's a battle between the rights and responsibilities of the individual versus the tyranny of the collective. That's it. Every single issue you hear today and tomorrow falls into that category. Now, the only way that the individual can fight is to raise their voice and to speak out. We have had conservatives, my editorial in The Spectator, which, by the way, you've got a free copy of The Spectator there. You've got a fantastic cover there from Sarah Dudley, who's sitting here. You can say hello to her later on. Give her a big round of applause. And you also have Alexandra Marshall, who is the editor of the online Spectator, who does such a brilliant job. She's here today as well. Give her a big round of applause. Now, the only way, my editorial this week is simply that the curse of conservatism is cowardice. That's it. The curse of conservatism is cowardice. We've had enough of cowardly conservatives. It's no longer good enough to just sit there and go, oh, let's not worry about this, we'll have an election in a few years' time. Conservatives must speak up. You as individuals must speak up and raise your voices. And if you learn anything today, it is that an individual can make a huge difference. Nigel Farage made a huge difference. He'll be talking about that. Zion Lights, Extinction Rebellion, she joined. And then she realized that she could actually solve the problem she was concerned about in a different way, an individual who spoke up. You're going to hear individuals today. It is the individual who speaks up who changes the world. Rita Panahi comes from Iran, or her parents are from Iran. Iran now, brave women, brave individuals are taking off their hijabs. throwing them away to fight against an oppressive regime. Rita.
They are, and you talk about brave women. It takes a great deal of courage to protest in a country like Iran, where you can be locked up, you can be beaten, you can be killed for dissent, for protesting. You can have all those things happen to you for just incorrectly wearing your compulsory hijab. So these women whose mothers were free. I mean, this is the thing a lot of people don't understand about Iran is it hasn't always been some Islamist hellhole. It used to be relatively modern, free, Western. Certainly my mum's generation, you look at the photos from the 60s and 70s and you could be looking at New York or London, you know, the fashions and the atmosphere. And then the Islamic Revolution happened and people's rights were overnight stripped away, particularly women. So we've got to understand that you can go backwards. There's not just this endless progress towards greater freedom and individual liberty. Things that you took for granted can be taken from you, and freedom has to be fought for. It's never free, and I think our generation has been a little bit pampered for too long. Our conservatives have become, you say cowardice, but they're lazy, they're unprincipled. They don't actually have values that they want to go to war for. Well, say what you will about the left. You look at the Albanese government right now, they're not wasting a second. They are pushing through their agenda every single day, making appointments, making consequential policy changes. What did the coalition do? How many terms were they in for? And really, what values did they protect? What values did they advance? And we've got to stop just protecting. We've got to actually advance our values. We've got to fight for our values.
James.
Well, that's exactly right. And I mean, the thing is, Rita, you know, you talk about Iran, and we're all, of course, stunned and shocked and horrified by the scenes that we're seeing out of Iran. And by the way, where is Joe Biden? And where is Anthony Albanese? And where are the Western governments who all want to give Iran a nuclear weapon for whatever reason on this? Well, no, they're all being silent about that. But, you know, that's the really big thing, though, about freedom. You know, okay, there the freedom and the fight for freedom is a very physical, visceral one. It's out there on the streets. But here, don't think that there's not, you know, different sort of issues. I mean, like, we live in a society now where if you often don't say the right things, don't think the right things, don't mouth the right platitudes, don't stand for the right ceremonies that we've all decided are important for us and respect them, then, you know, you can lose your job, you can lose your respect, you can be dragged online, you can become unemployable, all of these things. And, you know, in that sense, it's a lot like, you know, in the old days of Eastern Europe when, you know, you were free to say, hey, the government sucks, but you weren't going to get a job or you're going to lose your job. And this is the thing, though, about freedom. What you made a point, Rita, I think was absolutely correct. Freedom is not the natural state of nature. The natural state of nature is that people lord it over one another, the strong over the weak, you know, people who want power versus those who just want to get on and lead their lives. Freedom is something like, you know, anything that is built by man, yes, man and woman, of course, you know, whatever your gender, but that you care about, you know, it has to be maintained. Your house has to be maintained. Your car has to be maintained. The Harbor Bridge, you know, they start painting it every year at one end, and by the time they get to the other end, they've dealt with all the rust and painted it, and then they have to start again. And if you stop that, and if you stop that process, what happens? Well, we see what's happening. We see what's happening right now. Rust sets in, decay sets in, and things start falling apart. So everybody here, you know, as part of this, what you're doing is essentially, you know, you are the maintenance crew for freedom in this country, and we've all got to get to work.
Well, James, coming across the Harbour Bridge this morning, there's a big crane there, and the crane had 3 flags on it. The Aboriginal flag, the Indigenous flag, which was, by the way, designed by an art director in 1970. But anyway, it obviously has huge significance culturally. Anyway, the art director did very well.
Although it's the same flag that the Albanese government keeps hanging upside down
yeah.
at all of their events.
We were going to do, last week on Outsiders, we were going to do the show upside down. I actually asked Sky if they could do it, and there were lots of scratching
So for everybody with like hangovers Sunday morning, you know, they look right side up. This is good, yeah.
Anyway, we didn't. We did something else instead. But coming across the bridge, there was a crane, and it had the 3 flags, The Indigenous flag was the bottom one, which I think that was, disrespectful.
Someone will be sacked
Someone
for
will be
that.
sacked for that. Then there was a flag which I think is the New South Wales flag, and then the flag on top was the CFMEU flag. So they had their priorities right. We know exactly what state, and Rita's
I did love
from
this-
Victoria, so you know all about it.
the CMFEU. I heard, I think it was Setkar giving a bit of a speech about stolen land as he was laying concrete. It's like, well, if it's stolen land, why are you furthering that debt by theft, I should say, by building a high-rise on it, because you should be handing it back to who it's stolen from. It's so incoherent, some of these platitudes that we're all forced to listen to over and over again. You actually break it down and look at, what does that actually mean? Why are we hearing this multiple times? Why are we hearing this at every function? And it's just such empty virtue signalling.
But
There's just no substance or coherence or intelligence behind it. And I think, like you said, James, it's almost, you will submit to this and you will not.
Well, it's more than that, though. It's more than it is absolutely right. It is about that, submission to whatever the progressive regime of the day is. And of course, this is a thing we know, is that the people in this room, and there's a percentage of people in the population that are absolutely committed to our side of things. They see things our way. There's a side on the other side, maybe a bit larger, but whatever, on the other side that's committed essentially to revolution and overturning all the structures of society and rebuilding society in their own sort of utopia. But then there's a huge number of people in the middle out there, and they are just waiting to see which side is going to be the winning side and jump in. And right now they see the other side as winning, and it's not because we're not winning. It's just because we're not fighting the fight. I
Well,
think.
we don't
That's
turn
the
up
key
to the
thing. We're not
fight.
fighting. We're not fighting. That's the point. Yeah.
And I think that huge percentage of the population who are not really either side committed, I think there's a lot of apathy there. I don't think they're just waiting to see who's winning. But there's a great deal of apathy. But I think if you test them on their beliefs and their values, the overwhelming majority would fall into our side. But they're just not aware of what's happening. They don't know what's happening in their kids' school. They don't know what's happening in government institutions.
We saw during COVID how easy it was for the majority of people to fall into line with authoritarianism, and that is what is truly terrifying. It's not that they think they have good values. They think, oh yeah, I'm doing the right thing because the government has told me that this is the correct thing. So it's almost like a large percentage of the population have just handed over their sense of morality to the government and said, well, you tell me what's right or wrong. Partly this is, I think it was G.K. Chesterton, was it? The absence of religion, that's another story. But the relish with which people adopted the COVID religion, or the relish with which people adopt the climate religion, or whatever, it's going to be a different one, or the trans religion, or whatever. They adopt these things, and they with religious zeal.
But that's the thing. That's the thing. Because,
that's the problem.
Because, and I don't know, how many people here are religious or not, but Chesterton also said that essentially when you believe in nothing, you believe in anything, right? Okay, and so that's where we are. And Australia, the challenge is, I think, a bit different than in a place like the United States, where I come from, where there's a bigger...
Do you? Really?
Yeah. Who knew, right? Anyway, the point is that, there's a greater sort of religiosity in the community in the United States, which I think provides a bit of a buffer against this sort of believe in anything sort of thing, because here people will.
The ideologues are in the churches now.
They will. Of course, they're in the churches,
That's true.
but
The churches have been captured.
people want
Absolutely.
to believe in something, and so here, this whole progressive religion, whether it's climate change. Oh, well, we just want to do the right thing. We're the moral thing. We'll just sacrifice our economy on the altar and appease the sun and throw a virgin into the volcano, and then we'll all be fine, and the weather will stop, and maybe we'll just eat some bugs. We won't have all this La Nina. We've decided that now in Australia, post-settlement, Australia, Anglo-Australian culture, that's not really any good. That's all bad anymore. So we will just glom on and colonially appropriate indigenous culture for ourselves, because, that's...
Won't appropriate it, we'll make it up. We'll fabricate it. That's what we'll do. We'll fabricate a history. I'm sure the history of Indigenous Australia is fascinating. But that's not what we're getting.
You're
We're
getting Bruce
getting
Pascoe.
fiction.
You're getting Bruce
We're getting
Pascoe.
made up
Are you
ideas.
questioning the authenticity and accuracy of a book, say, like Dark Emu? Is that what's happening?
Rowan, wash your
'Cause I
mouth
won't
out.
stand
As if
for
I
it.
would dare. As if I would dare. Now, we have a very... Outsiders always has the best guests. That's why, apart from the three of us, obviously people, watch for the three of us, but it's also the guests. Well, two of us, yeah. It's also the guests.
Where's that guest going to go?
It's also the guests. And we have, over the 4 or 5 years of Outsiders, we've managed to bring some amazing people. Many of them actually came from the original CPAC, onto the screen, onto Australian screens, and introduce all sorts of people. And it's been great. And we're really privileged that people enjoy coming on Outsiders. But what we always try to do is introduce and promote those individuals that I was talking about, individuals who have the bravery to stand up for their values, for what they believe in, for their fight against the orthodoxy of whatever it might be, the collective leftist mindset. And we've been very successful in promoting many individuals. One of our proudest individuals who has gone on to great things, and Rita and Peter were the first people to get her on telly, but she's been a regular on Outsiders, I'm delighted to say, is a guest with us now. Big welcome for the second bravest woman in Australia, Catherine Deves.
Where's Catherine sitting? Where's she living? She's sitting
Now, the way it works, now, Catherine, as you know, or if you don't know, we're going to find out, she's going to tell you, but she went through hell simply fighting for what she believes in and the rights of girls to play sports without, in safety. Now, the way we do it on Outsiders, each of us always asks a question. I always ask the first one, and then Rita asks the second one, and then James cobbles something together at the end, which is,
often
Catherine,
superfluous.
often superfluous, because you and I have covered it all already,
Exactly.
haven't we? Yeah. Catherine, what was the worst moment?
Well, first of all, I want to say good morning, everyone, and it's great to be here at CPAC, which for us Aussies, it's like big day out for Conservatives, or for our American friends, that would be Coachella for Conservatives. So for me, the worst moment in the election. So I stood up for women and girls, and then I put my hand up to be the candidate for the Liberal Party in Warringah. And the activism that I had been doing prior came to light, and I was subjected to the most vile opprobrium and threats simply for stating facts about biological reality. I received death threats and rape threats. I had to have 24-hour security. But it was when they came for my children and they released someone leaked my nomination application form to the media, and everything about me was out there in the hands of those who sought to silence me. So when I realised that was the case, I had to have 24/7 security to simply be an ordinary candidate in the federal election. This is what the neoliberals will subject you to if they want to silence you.
Catherine was so brave, and that bravery was not rewarded by the party she was running for. The Liberal Party did not support her. In fact, they silenced her. And it's absolute shame. I would say as well, and I hope Jacinta doesn't mind me saying this, but the Liberal Party is not supporting Jacinta Price. And she is the smartest, most articulate person representing Indigenous Australia, and the Liberal Party are not behind her. And they've got to be. They've got to be. And by silencing Catherine, I believe they lost the election, because her bravery, if she'd been allowed to speak, I reckon she could have won the election for them. Rita.
Catherine, I want to ask you about what you experienced, because so much of it wasn't led by the activist class. It wasn't by the rabid, fringe-dwelling activists. It was the mainstream media. So tell us
Hang
about...
on, they are the activists.
Well, they are the activist media, but... and that, I think, is the reason why so many people who are conservative do shut their mouths because it's the media. It is the media at the root of so much of the ill that's within our society, let's be honest. And they came for you, and often members of the media who are always pushing the barrel of we need more women in parliament, we need to have greater diversity, we need to have greater gender diversity, and yet when you put up your hand, what sort of treatment did you get?
Well, you have to be the right sort of woman with the right sort of opinions. And if you're going to go against the prevailing paradigm and shine a light on things like, for me, it was gender identity ideology, and it's marched through our institutions, our corporations, law, judiciary, health, education, and the way it's coming for women's rights when women cannot even define themselves as an adult human female, when mothers are called gestating parents. I highlighted that and I said it was wrong. I don't want you coming for my children and indoctrinating them into this ideology in schools, and they do not like it when a light is being shone on those views. So the mainstream media, which here in Australia is very much captured by the so-called progressive left, and they won't tolerate any dissent to their narrative.
And they set out to systematically destroy you. It was just a shameless exercise, bringing up tweets out of context from 4 years ago. I mean, it was...
And the worst example of that wasn't the worst example of that. New South Wales Treasurer, Matt Keane, who went...
Shame! Shame!
Wasn't the worst example of that Matt Keane, who went, and you remember on, I don't know how many people heard the Ben Fordham radio interview, where, he was called out for completely misquoting you, and yet he got away with that, and that lie just hung there.
Well, what shocked me was that I was being burned at the stake as a witch for saying words, and no one actually looked at what I was trying to prosecute. I mean, it was things like where we're medicalising the bodies of otherwise healthy children. They are being experimented on. I spoke about that. And they didn't look into that argument. I mean, that's the real story there. And I think that those journalists who dropped the ball on that, they're missing what could be the biggest medical scandal of our time, and it says a lot when they want to silence someone who is trying to bring up the issue rather than what's actually going on.
And that's why it's so dangerous, this silencing and the cowardice of the political party, in this instance the Liberal Party. But Catherine has shown what I think is the central theme of this conference, that the individual can make a difference. And a year ago, or 18 months ago, when we first had Catherine coming on Outsiders and on Sky, the difference between the entire debate around transgenders in sports, the entire debate about children and transgender, et cetera, thanks largely to Catherine's efforts, it's now right out there in the mainstream, and it's now acceptable discussion to have, and she's made a huge difference, just one woman's bravery.
And Catherine, I want to ask you this here, because, like the left always says, oh, we're the party of science. We believe in reality. We're the reality-based community. And yet we saw, during your campaign, we saw this incredible attempt to deny simple, basic physiological facts that in sport, on balance, a man is going to be stronger than a woman. And then in contact sports, that can be dangerous. What do you see? Talk to us about the gaslighting that we saw. That's a very popular word on the left, but it's always on the projection there. And also, you ran in Warringah, tealest of the teal seats. Do you think that the future for conservatism is to cut loose those sort of posh seats, those eastern suburbs, sort of north suburb seats, where they're teal, and instead concentrate more on heartland seats in Western Sydney and start the fight back from places like that?
Now, just interrupt. Did you see how James snuck in 2 questions? He does this, it drives us nuts.
He needs to be policed very carefully.
This is why we need a commercial break or something, then we can go,
Well, because you couldn't ask him. So anyway, Catherine, please tell us.
Well, obviously it's something that I've been pondering a lot, and I think that in the city seats, I don't think we should give up on them. I think when we have the Labor Greens Teal government and we see how much damage they're going to do, how woke they are going to be, how they're going to be indoctrinating our children into these ideologies, I would think that the sensible Australians might want to go back to being sensible and vote for the Liberal Party. But I also think it's really important to speak to the aspirational Australians, hardworking Australians who might not be on Twitter. We can't forget about them. They're the silent majority. They're working hard.
Most Australians aren't on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's
But
Yeah.
most
the rest
of the
are being
media
banned.
is.
Yeah.
Most of the media. We should note, I can't see very clearly because it's very dark there, but I think we've got someone who is identified as a woman and broke all sorts of world records in weightlifting sitting in the audience. Is Zuby in the house?
Zuby! Hey!
World record holder. World record.
Fantastic, Zuby. Right.
And Catherine, I just think what he did was just genius because he used mockery, he used humour, and he illustrated just how ridiculous the arguments of the left are. And do you see that as a way for Conservatives to be a bit more effective in fighting, to use humour and just show how almost beyond parody the left has become?
I think so. I mean, showing, where we have men competing in women's sports, just going along with it and showing how absurd it really is. I think that's absolutely going to be really important to bring humour into it because what they are pushing, it's just nonsense.
It is. I mean, we had the women's soccer team, the Australian soccer team, the Matildas, beaten 7-0 by the under-15 Newcastle boys side. Just Newcastle. I'm not talking about Australia.
Not in Sydney.
I mean, that... It's fantastic. We love the Hunter Valley, but it just shows if you value women... I mean, do you think that the fight is in the elite ranks? Because we've seen several sporting codes come out and actually say enough. Or do you think the fight should be at the grassroots with people seeing their daughters competing or perhaps working for scholarships that might be compromised, things like that?
Well, community feeds elite, so we cannot forget about community. And I have many parents and grandparents contacting me who are distraught about their daughters' sporting opportunities and threats to their physical safety when they're having to play contact or combat sports with males. So I think we just need to go back and have a blanket policy that anyone who is born male, observed and recorded male at birth cannot play in the female category. End of.
Now, we're going to finish up in a couple of minutes, but we always do like to do a little bit of lefty lunacy on Outsiders, and there's always so much material that we have. But I'm delighted, if you haven't read it already, it was interesting to learn this morning that the Republican movement has lost that great, talented man with the red thing on his head. Peter Fitzsimons is not no longer in the running the Republican movement. He did such a brilliant job. It's the lowest it's ever been, James, would you say, the polling?
It is, and it's now just sort of this, it's basically now the Republican movement, I think, is three guys, sitting at the Bellevue Hotel bar in Paddington whining about the dismissal. I don't think anybody cares about the Republic anymore, but I will say, though, that, the big thing now, the fight over the Constitution, Australian identity, isn't over because The Voice is just simply the young progressive identity politics version of the Republic,
James,
and it is...
They'll fuse them. They will merge them. They'll merge them.
But can we start calling things what they are?
Yes, sorry, Rita, you're right.
It is a race-based referendum. Call it what it is. It isn't a voice. When we start calling it The Voice, we're almost making the left's argument for them.
No, you're right.
And the left is very clever at giving their agenda terms that you could never argue with.
Black Lives Matter.
I mean, who could be against safe
Black Lives Matter. Who can speak against that?
Who could be against that? But peel back the title and you see the poison. And this referendum, this is where we need the Liberals to come out and fight. If they run dead on this issue, then why would any Conservative support them? Why would anybody who values...
They've already run dead on
like
it. It's too late. The moment to oppose it was right from the get-go, like Jacinta did. But to sit back and go, oh, we're going to look for the detail, that's like, we know it's a racist structure. What more detail do you need? That's it. It's all over. done and dusted. But no, they're going to find some way to balance it. And it's shameful, and this is the cowardice of conservatives.
And note that there are already 11 Indigenous Australians in Parliament, the upper and lower house, which is a great achievement and good for them. But this is something to be proud of, and you don't need to bolt on something we don't have any detail about. We don't know what the scope of.
We have enough detail, James.
We have enough detail, but
it compromises the notion of one man, one vote.
Bingo.
Yeah.
That
That's
in
all
itself should be grounds enough to say no, 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 no. But Jacinta Price, you mentioned her. She should be the Indigenous Affairs shadow because she can articulate these arguments.
Absolutely.
She speaks with authority, and we've got someone in there now.
Absolutely.
We've got someone in the role who is an echo, who wants the voice.
There's a bedwetter
the
in the
voice,
in the
the
role.
race-based
We've got a
referendum to
bedwetter
succeed.
in charge. Yeah, it drives you nuts. Speaking of language, this is why we have to be straight with our language. And when we talked about the majority of the Liberal Party, we should call them bedwetters because that's what they are. So we use the correct terminology. But also on the gender thing, Catherine and I were on telly the other evening, and Catherine brought to my attention this story of. I tried to read it. It was written by the ABC, and Catherine sent it to me. I couldn't make head nor tail of it. And it was a they, a this, a they, a that, and someone wanted to be in some sports but couldn't because they, this. I couldn't make any sense of it because they changed all the pronouns to suit this particular individual. So the discussion we had, I said that, so basically it's a Sheila who wants to be a bloke but wants to still play in the Sheila's sports team so she doesn't get beaten up by the blokes. That made sense. I understood that once but you read the ABC and you talk about language, it was not comprehensible. And the big lie, calling, if you use words like transgender woman, most common sense people who aren't listening to the arguments think, oh, it's a woman, it's a woman. And that's what the left wants. They want to manipulate the language to get their way every time. James.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, it is the Orwellian war on language.
And
that is, and once you control the language, and also the other thing, by the way, remember, they start this very, very young. They start in the schools, So all of, how many people here know your kids, your grandkids, they come home, and you've got to deprogram them from all this stuff that they get during the day. I mean, you hear these stories every single day. Even from, preschool, they tell, kids that, well, the country is racist and this and that and the other thing. And so they grow up. I think that for all the faults of the previous government in not blowing up the curriculum, which it absolutely needed to have done. When Alan Tudge said quite correctly that in the history curriculum, there's very, very little in there that would make you think anything good about Australia. That's what we all know now is that, it starts very, very young. And so by the time people get to be older, they don't, have even the frame of reference by which they can, start to fight this. This is what we all have to do. We all have to go out, and it's an education piece for everybody as much as anything else. Rita?
It is, and it's very important not to cede linguistic territory to the radical left, and it's what we've done repeatedly. It's what the media is repeatedly guilty of, and it's a very dangerous game. And the slippery slope, it's no fallacy because it starts off with, well, you're just polite, you respect someone's pronouns, you observe them. Why wouldn't you do that? Then the next thing is, well, we should all have our pronouns on our emails and our business. Well, you don't have your pronouns
well, you're
listed.
A racist. What's wrong with you?
Are you a bigot?
Yeah.
Are you a transphobe? And it's just this creep, creep.
It's a salami strategy. They just take little slices. This seems reasonable. This seems reasonable. This seems reasonable. And then the next thing you know, you've got Leah Thomas winning that swimming competition, and the three girls standing off the side going, "What?"
Leah Thomas, whose teammates say, still fully male-bodied.
It's a bit early here, Rita. It's a bit early for this.
Exposing penis in the change rooms, and these poor swimmers, not only are they being beaten by Leah Thomas in the pool, but they can't complain about having a doodle in their face in the change rooms, and they know that Leah still dates women.
And you can't still doodle with
you're
that
in the
dude.
change rooms, you're worried about someone perving on you. It's just perverse. And if you complain, then you're the problem, because why aren't you comfortable with Leah Thomas in the change room?
Because you're a bigot, Rita.
Because you're a bigot.
Yeah.
And that's it. We're going to take a short break.
Oh, we are.
And we'll see you
in a tick.
In a tick. Thank you.